Kicking off the list at number 10. Juggernaut. Cain Marko made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12, when Cain and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Cain was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So Cain grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Cain the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Cain dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier's school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Cain embraces the Sidorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It helps the studio out quite a bit. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this X-Men list. Number 9, Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978. So she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she can shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of her thing. Number 8, Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina. And when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon. Number 7, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's so gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now of course there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the Mutant Massacre happened. So, okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the Horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man. Number 5, Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing. Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the third of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with. Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned. Number 2, Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously, his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we'd have to put her at number 1. Number 10, Thunderbird. AKA John Proudstar, Thunderbird made his comic book debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, and during his childhood on the Apache Reservation in Camp Verde, Arizona, John wasn't like the other kids on the reservation. He grew up extremely strong, and he became an athlete, and at just the age of 20, his mutant powers manifested when he wrestled a charging bison with his bare hands. That's a lot of strength. Now, this earned him fame on the reservation, so much so that Charles Xavier caught wind of the young man through Cerebro and invited him to join the X-Men. The first mission John took was actually the rescue of the original X-Men from Krakoa. Xavier then gave him the nickname Thunderbird. Now, Apocalypse experimented on Thunderbird and transformed him into the Horseman of War at one point. Now, fortunately, this didn't last forever as he broke free of Apocalypse's mind control and began getting his life back together. You can find all of this in Exiles issue 1. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you haven't already, you can go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It really does help our studio out a lot. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for supporting Top 10 Nerd. Now back to this list. Number 9, Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Wither, aka Kevin Ford, grew up thinking he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person on the planet. His mutant powers started to manifest, and he noticed it first in his plants and then on his clothes. See, his plants would die and his clothes would start to fade away. They would start to decay, almost wither away. Now we get it. Now his father tried to calm him down once he realized this, but coming into contact with Kevin, well, you could have guessed what happens. He was soon discovered and was invited to join Xavier's Institute to learn how to control his wild powers of organic decay. He got close with Wallflower, aka Lori Collins, but in the House of M storyline, he touched her arm and crippled her. He ran away hurt and was soon met by Selene, the Black Queen, and she invited Wither to join her circle, and he gladly accepted. Number 8. Polaris. She's a powerful mutant who came to control magnetism, and she made her first appearance in X-Men 49 as Lorna Dane. But then in issue 97, she was Polaris. Cerebro identified her as a mutant when she stepped out of the shower and had green hair. So Iceman had a crush on her when she was part of the team, but she was in love with Havoc. Her powers are of course similar to Magneto's, but she lost them after the M-Day event as well. So when Apocalypse came into the picture, he also restored her powers, as she was deemed the Horseman Pestilence. She was saved by her lover man Havoc and was also healed of Apocalypse's mind control. So again, didn't last too long, but definitely did see enough dark days. Number 7, Glob Herman. Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants a lot. So already we're off to a promising start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not having it. So much so that his mother drove out Glob to Westchester and left him for Professor X. See, this mutation was interesting. His skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is kind of cool. He runs with the New Mutants now, but at one point he did join the Omega Gang, led by Kid Omega, and they made their own stand for mutant rights. See, Glob wasn't a fan of the school, and he also had a grudge by the way that his father treated him. So he had a pretty harsh take on how to treat humans. Poor Glob, I mean, he had a rough childhood, not exactly his fault here at all. Number 6, Kid Omega. Okay, that guy that I just mentioned, of course, I'll fill you in a little bit on him as well and what gang that he was a part of. Quintavious Quinton Quirinius made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134, and he has been described as one of the most powerful telepaths, one of the most strongest mutants ever besides Jean Grey. He was once the host of the Phoenix Force as well, so that should give you an indication. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang, which was a gang that takes out humans for the crimes they committed against mutants. He even went to a tattoo shop to get him and the gang tattoos of an Omega symbol to put over top of the X-Men symbol. So they weren't playing around here. I mean, at least try wash off tattoos first. I mean, give it some thought, you know, those things are forever. Number 5, Banshee. Making his first appearance in X-Men issue 28, Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep in Ireland. Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. He went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but was killed during Deadly Genesis when he tried to stop the Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. Banshee remained one of the unliving until the Apocalypse twins resurrected him using the Death Seed, thus becoming the Horseman of Death himself. Later on, he ended up in the custody of the X-Men when Beast thought it was best to put him in a coma until the healing of Death Seed energy is complete. Number 4, Jubilee. Making her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 244, Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, first discovered her mutant powers of generating this blinding and explosive blast from her hands. She was discovered by Dazzler, Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm during a rescue at the mall. And when she followed the women through the portal, she ended up at the X-Men's temporary base in the Australian outback. So she stayed there hiding, and then when the Reavers captured Wolverine and took over their base, she borrowed the X-Men's clothes and made a suit for herself. So she went and rescued Wolverine and aided him back to health. She's already an X-Men, look at that, just like that. So Jubilee and Wolverine ended up becoming a good pair, working missions together, and then a vampire ended up infecting the area of Union Square and Curse of the Mutants, and Jubilee, being caught in the path of this infection, ended up becoming a vampire herself. And in perfect harmony, she in the story ends up infecting Wolverine during her bloodthirsty time. And he was coming back to rescue her as well when it all happened. She's kept in a holding cell where Wolverine is really the only X-Men saying that they should keep her alive. So rough times, rough times. Number 3, tattoo. AKA Christine Cord, she made her first comic book debut in New X-Men issue 126. She's a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin. And if that's not cool enough, she can phase through matter. So, coolest mutant ever, okay? She is also one of the Omega Gang members, and one time, her and the other members, led by Quentin Quire, started a riot at Xavier Institute during opening day celebrations. So Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head, and then told him that if she became solid, he wouldn't survive to see the end of it. But then, Emma Frost reverted the trick by turning into Diamond, and then putting her hand into Tattoo's head to prevent her from taking out Cyclops. What a confusing sight to see. Superheroes are so cool. And at one point, she also attacked Beast and Wolverine, but she was being controlled by Cassandra Nova, so. Number 2, Rachel Summers. She's the daughter of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in an alternate universe on Earth 811, and she makes her first appearance in X-Men 141, the Days of Future Past story. So she was born from the Phoenix Force merging with Jean, so she got the abilities of a telepath and of a telekinetic. She was raised at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters when she met Franklin Richards and became really close. Now one day the school was attacked by federal troops, and she was one of the only survivors. She was taken in by the crazy Ahab, where she was brainwashed and became the mutant Hound, where she used her psionic powers to hunt down other mutants. Her time as this horrible mutant hunter weighed heavy on her conscience afterwards. I mean, she even got her face marked up by these guys. It was just an all bad situation. And finally, number 1, Pyro. Pyro was once a student at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, and in X2, we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. By the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. And in the comics, Simon Lasker makes his first appearance as Pyro in X-Men Gold, Volume 2, Issue 1, when Mesmero tricks him into believing he's Charles Xavier, and he joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So not good on screen, not good in the comic books. Still a cool character, just likes to dip into the dark side.
And at number 10, Holocaust. I mean, his name enough should have you wary. Holocaust first appeared in 1995's X-Men Alpha, and is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Holocaust was initially from the Age of Apocalypse timeline, where he was known as Nemesis, where he was said to be one of Apocalypse's children. Magneto would strip Nemesis of his flesh in a battle, enraged for the deaths that Nemesis had caused. His body was then retrieved by Apocalypse, who gave him to Dark Beast, who managed to capture his spiritual essence and put it inside a near indestructible crystalline exo-armor, a procedure in which Nemesis became Holocaust, or rather, Holocaust was born. This character is particularly terrifying for one specific reason: his abilities. He initially possessed the power to generate highly destructive bionuclear microwave energy blasts, which can be super destructive. And later on, when he became an energy being, he gained the ability to drain the life force from other beings in order to charge his own exoskeleton that acted as a suit of armor for him. He's pretty much physically invulnerable, or at least he was. The character was killed by Hyperion, who cracked open Holocaust's exoskeleton and then absorbed all of his bioenergy into himself by literally inhaling him. So that's a fun way to go. And at number 9, Krakoa. Krakoa is one of the X-Men's earliest villains, having appeared in Giant Size X-Men issue 1 in 1975. There's been 2 versions of Krakoa over the years, with the first being the villainous one. It appeared initially as a small island in the Pacific Ocean that was located near a nuclear bombing test site. The radiation from that test site mutated the island's ecosystem, which altered the island into a hive mind entity in 1945, something that Nick Fury and his Howling Commandos witnessed. They encountered much of the island's intelligence and established a peaceful treaty in exchange for keeping the island's existence a complete secret. Now flash forward to 1975. Krakoa decides it's hungry and it wants to feed on the life force of mutants, because I guess mutants are tastier than humans. It kills a young mutant team and later captures the original iteration of X-Men. This is what causes Professor Xavier to create the second wave of X-Men, the team that consists of Wolverine, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Thunderbird, Sunfire, and Banshee, all to save the first iteration. Polaris eventually launches Krakoa into outer space, and later it becomes captured by the Stranger. Now this Krakoa is perhaps one of the most physically intimidating entities that the mutant team has ever fought. It is a literal monstrous island. The second version of it though, in case you're wondering, is much more benevolent, having been grown by a member of the Hellfire Club but wanting to redeem itself with the X-Men and become one of them. It ends up becoming a part of the school and even helps the X-Men financially by growing diamonds on a tree that it produces. Man, imagine having a friend who could grow diamonds on trees for you. It's the dream. And at number 8, Sauron. Don't be confused by its name. This is no Middle-earth Sauron. Luckily. Sauron of the Marvel Universe is quite different, despite being evil and having taken the name Sauron after the Lord of the Rings villain. Sauron is the alter ego of Carl Lycos, who has a Jekyll and Hyde relationship of sorts with his humanoid humanoid pterodactyl form of his. He's essentially an energy vampire who often lives within the prehistoric jungle known as the Savage Land. First appearing in this form in X-Men issue 60 back in 1969, Sauron was initially meant to be a giant bat-like creature. But back in those times, the comics code authority was still in effect, somewhat. And his creators, Roy Thomas and Neil Adams, inquired with the organization, who suggested that the character's vampiric traits would be in violation of the code. So instead of going with something that resembled a giant vampire bat, which was banned according to the code, they ended up opting out for a form that looked more like a pterodactyl. Anywho, what can Sauron do aside from look absolutely terrifying? Well, he's got all the superhuman fixings: strength, speed, stamina, durability, and intelligence. He flies, duh, has hypnotic eyes, fire breath, razor-sharp claws, and most importantly, he can absorb life forces and mutant powers, and can sense mutants too. In addition to this, he can gain the powers of other mutants. Once, while battling against the Avengers and the X-Men, he was shot in the head by the second Black Widow, but survived thanks to having absorbed Wolverine's healing factor. And at 7, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is most well known in Marvel Comics for being the first foe of Wolverine's, the enemy in which Wolverine and the Hulk take on together. Based on the Wendigo legend of the Algonquin people, it's a large beastly creature with superhuman strength, stamina, durability, and agility. It has enhanced speed, hardened and sharp talons, and a regenerative healing factor. It's found in the woods of northern Canada and is the result of a curse that takes place under very specific conditions, primarily when a human in the forests feed on human flesh. Any of you familiar with the recent video game title Until Dawn may be familiar with the legends, although the Wendigo of Marvel Comics looks quite different than the video game's representation. Now, over the years, the Wendigo has taken on its fair share of mutants, including Wolverine, Nightcrawler, and the members of Alpha Flight. And the Wendigo isn't just one character either. Various different Wendigo have appeared over the years, all formerly humans who partook in cannibalism and have become these wretched creatures. And at 6, Predator X. Predator X first hit the panels of Marvel Comics back in 2007 in New X-Men issue 34. It is a grotesque beast, reptile-like, with superhuman strength and speed, sharp claws and teeth, toxic saliva, accelerated hearing, and its body is covered in non-toxic inorganic mercury. That latter bit means it is highly resistant to physical damage and can draw materials in the environment surrounding it to help reform itself. So why is it scary? If you aren't already kind of freaked out by it? Well, it can track mutants on their genetic signature and is pretty much tireless, meaning it can track its prey relentlessly until it succeeds, wearing down its target for as long as necessary. It can run at speeds of 199 kilometers an hour for a total of 19 hours straight before having to slow down. Luckily, its insides are not as durable as its outsides. Wolverine managed to kill it by tearing it apart from the inside out with his claws. But fun fact, it killed one of the villains that we mentioned on our part 1 list, Peeper, who it devoured on the side of a road. It's vicious to say the least. Predator X was created thanks to Stryker, who, prior to dying, requested that a living weapon be made in order to combat the coming of a mutant antichrist, aka Hope Summers. Moving on to number 5, Sugar Man. Sugar Man is by no means a good X-Men villain, but he is definitely a terrifying one to take in. First debuting in the Age of Apocalypse timeline, Earth 295, in Generation Next issue 2 in 1995, Sugar Man would manage to sneak his way out of that reality and onto Earth 616, when bombs are blowing the crap out of 295 as a last resort means to be rid of Apocalypse. Sugar Man, aside from being hideous and offensive to the eyes, is an expert biologist and geneticist. He has 4 arms, superhuman strength, razor-sharp teeth and claws, an indefinitely long bioelectric tongue, ew, an enhanced sense of smell, and has the ability to alter his body mass and size, which is actually how he sneaked his way over to 616, by hiding in Colossus's boot of all places. He's responsible for a handful of deaths on Earth 295, and when he arrives on 616, he ends up forcibly enslaving hundreds of mutants for the magistrates. The reason why he really ends up on this list? Just look at him. From scary looks to scary intentions, moving on to number 4, we have the Reavers. The Reavers are a team of criminal cyborgs who first debuted in Uncanny X-Men issue 229 back in May of 1988, created by Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. The Reavers, led by a man named Donald Pierce, are dedicated to the destruction of mutants, and specifically the destruction of Wolverine. Initially, they were a gang of looters who operated in Australia, but began to branch out when they used the mutant gateway to teleport across the globe in order to pull off more sophisticated robberies. The X-Men stopped them, with only a handful of the Reavers escaping that first encounter, later reassembling under Pierce, who takes the team into a more militarized direction, using them as an assassination squadron of sorts bent on taking vengeance on the X-Men. They've done some pretty messed up stuff over the years, including capturing Wolverine, torturing him, and crucifying him. They're an extremist team bent on eliminating mutant kind, humans who have become cyborgs as part of the cause. And they've even stirred up trouble in alternate timelines too. In Age of Apocalypse, they were a band of human traitors who served the titular villain, and in the Ultimate Marvel Universe, they are human gladiators who have undergone surgery to become cyborgs, all for the purpose of hunting down mutants on live television. That's messed up. I mean, imagine running into a team of extremists like that who embrace technology in order to wipe out a race. Yeah, they're scary because they're a foe of the X-Men who are a little bit more realistic antagonists compared to some of their other enemies. We also got to see the Reavers make a cinematic debut in Logan, and needless to say they're pretty darn scary in their live-action adaptation as well. And at 3, the Purifiers. The Purifiers are one step up from the Reavers, and are unsettling for very similar reasons. They're a paramilitary and terrorist organization, also created by Chris Claremont, that debuted in Marvel graphic novel issue 5, X-Men God Loves, Man Kills. And they are led by none other than Reverend William Stryker, who is their founder. So their whole shtick is that they're Christian fundamentalists who believe that they are fighting a holy war against mutants. They see mutants as the children of the devil and therefore need to be exterminated. In their first appearance, they abducted Charles Xavier and several members of the X-Men team, killed mutant children, fought against Magneto, and almost executed Kitty Pryde. Luckily for her, one of Stryker's guards grew horrified with his actions and shot Stryker, resulting in Kitty getting away and Stryker being sent to prison. That wasn't the last of them though. Even after Stryker no longer led the group, other successors took over the leadership mantle, including his own son Jason Stryker. Later on, the Purifiers got their hands on Warren Worthington III's wings and used blood from them, extracted Apocalypse's techno-organic strain inside of them in order to graft it and then give to the Purifiers, giving them their own wings, a specific subgroup that would be called the Choir, whose whole MO was to, I quote, strike down Satan's spawn with God's own might. Archangel would later massacre all of the Choir minus 3 members. And at number 2, Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister is one of the most notorious X-Men villains. Sinister, aka Nathaniel Essex, first debuted as the employer of the assassin group the Marauders, mentioned in the Uncanny X-Men issue 212 in 1986, but first seen in the Uncanny X-Men issue 221, almost a whole year later. Not only is his aesthetic unsettling, but he's also capable of some really terrifying stuff. He's telepathic, telekinetic, has superhuman strength, durability, and longevity, can create concussive energy projections, and, potentially scariest of all, can manipulate his body on a molecular level. Born in 1859, he was obsessed with Darwin's theories and was considered an unorthodox biologist, conducting immoral experiments that would make him an outcast amongst his peers. He even dug up his dead firstborn child to experiment on it. After awakening Apocalypse, the villain would painfully transform him into an ageless being, with Essex taking on the name Sinister, which was the last thing that his wife called him on her deathbed. It's a wee bit masochistic, isn't it? And finally, in our number 1 spot, the Phoenix Force. One of the most terrifying foes that the X-Men have ever faced off against is the Phoenix Force, an entity that is an immortal and immutable manifestation of the universal force of life and passion, born of the void between states of being, the nexus of all psionic energy which does, has, and ever will exist within the Marvel multiverse. The Phoenix Force requires a host, and it manifested within Jean Grey, who, when losing control of it, became the Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix has a vast amount of abilities, is able to manipulate matter, energy, and life force, and has cosmic awareness, all of which makes Jean's Dark Phoenix incredibly powerful and threatening. In many cases, in alternate realities, Jean has completely wiped out the planet or consumed the universe when not stopped by the X-Men. And while much of the Phoenix saga has been retconned along with Jean dying and coming back to life and then dying and coming back to life again, the Phoenix Force has still proven to be rather deadly regardless. Over the years in the comics, the Phoenix Force has proven capable of taking on powerful foes like the Beyonder, absorbing stars for energy that creates supernovas capable of wiping out entire planets, and even flat out wiping out all of existence in What If issue 27 volume 1. I don't know about you guys, but to me that's scary as hell.
Number 10. Danger. I don't know if it's weird that I find Danger attractive, but as I said on part 1 of this list, cyborgs, robots, androids, and synthezoids all deserve love too, in my opinion. Danger as a sentient AI may be more than most, after how she was treated by Professor X, who basically ignored her sentience so that he could keep using her as a training room for his X-Men. Not cool, Charles. Not cool. Sure, she rose up and attempted to destroy the X-Men in revenge, and was pretty successful at battling them, at least at first, but I also can't help but feel that she was kind of justified in her villainy, especially when it came to her attempts to do harm to the Professor, who also was exiled at the time basically because of all the things that he'd done that had come to light. Number 9. Spiral. Spiral is awesome and hot because, well, she's a badass. She was originally a stunt woman known as Ricochet Rita, who met Longshot and got swept up in a temporal paradox, which was basically what led her to becoming her future self, the same future self who would end up attacking her. temporal paradox. Her story is also actually kinda sad, considering that her love for Longshot was what ended up getting her imprisoned, and then Longshot's mind was also wiped entirely of her. That's pretty sad. Harsh. Spiral ended up being heavily mentally and physically modified and turned into one of Mojo's loyal goons. Poor Rita. Spiral also just has a lot going on, and there is a lot about her that one could love. She's a very experienced and skilled fighter, she's jacked and has multiple arms, so she's really jacked, and she can cast spells via specific movements. However, she typically needs all of her arms to be free in order to be fully able to cast spells, as generally their motion and through dance is how she's able to do so. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more hot X-Men villains, so many, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. All the hot X-Men villains. Number 8. Azazel. Azazel is Nightcrawler's demon mutant daddy, who is considered hot enough by Mystique for her to sleep with, have the child of, and even potentially fall in love with. Romance. Yeah, that's right, in case you didn't know or you forgot, Mystique is also Nightcrawler's birth mom. Azazel claimed to be one of the oldest mutants in existence, and is also at times claimed to be Satan, or at least someone who is once in running to become Satan. He and his kind, mutant demons known as the Neophem, actually found themselves trapped in the Brimstone dimension, the dimension that Kurt Wagner travels through when teleporting with a BAMF. Azazel making babies like Kurt was actually all part of a long con plan to help him escape the Brimstone dimension, as he planned to use his children from Earth to build a sort of gateway out of there. Sort of Earth Kid bridge, I guess. It's kind of what he's trying to do, through sacrificing them. It really depends on what you're into, I suppose, but I know a lot of people find the devil and just demons in general pretty hot, both literally and also literally, I guess. Would we consider that even metaphorically? Not really. They're hot and they're hot. Number 7. Apocalypse. I mean, Apocalypse when it comes to X-Men villains is known for being one of the most unstoppable, and just for that reason we should bow down and worship the hotness of or whoever we're supposed to say his new Krakoan name. I don't speak Krakoan, but I'm trying. I'm really trying Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a hottie because of how capable and ruthless he is. He is inevitable, he is often undefeatable, and he is all-powerful. Apocalypse also generally is always operating from the bigger picture perspective. He has big plans, and who doesn't like someone who has that level of ambition? We all would want to rule as the queen by his side, no? But it turns out that that seat is already taken, sadly. But that's okay, Genesis is also another hottie. Another villain hottie. Number 6. Kandra. Like many villains who have come before and after her, I think a big part of Kandra's appeal is power. Why are we attracted to power? Well, because I think along with power comes a certain kind or level of confidence. At least it appears people who have power are generally confident, whether or not they feel that way. Something about that confidence, power, and dominant energy makes us feel safe, even when we actually might be in peril, because these are villains who might be threatening us. And generally, if you wind up tangoing with Kandra, you'll likely end up in peril at some point. At least that is what happened with Gambit in his miniseries. He and Kandra used to kinda be an item, but that didn't mean much when she felt he had betrayed her, and when Gambit found out what Kandra was really up to and how she'd actually been pitting the Thieves Guild and Assassins Guild of New Orleans against each other for years, basically creating their feud. Number 5. Shinobi Shaw. Shinobi Shaw is the son of Sebastian Shaw. Well, Sebastian Shaw I don't think will ever make my cut for hottest X-Men villains. Sorry, Sebastian. Shinobi is a cutie that I think deserves a spot. Shinobi Shaw didn't really start out as a villain, but seemed to become obsessed with inheriting all his father's power. He believed at one point to have killed Sebastian, and took his seat at the Hellfire Club and all of his connections for himself. During this time, he attempted to recruit Angel and Psylocke as members of the Hellfire Club's inner circle, but he failed. Later on, it was revealed Sebastian Shaw lived, and he returned to kill Shinobi, who was then resurrected, died again taking his own life, and later was resurrected on Krakoa once more. And I think that's it. He isn't really a villain in the current continuity, but that doesn't mean that he can't end up as one again. Although I do like him just being a nice guy. That's also good too. I wish he could just be a nice guy and be a villain. Wait, I feel like you can do that. You can do both. Number 4, Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix is one of the baddest of the bad, but hey, I love her, you love her, and you know, we can't help it because although she can destroy entire planets, she is still ultimately a hottie. And not only that, she represents someone who is identified as being inherently good turning bad, which for some reason makes her more attractive when it comes to her evilness. The Dark Phoenix was initially explained as being Jean Grey, who had bonded with the Phoenix Force, became the Phoenix, and then became corrupted and turned dark. In reality, it was a little more complicated than that. It wasn't really Jean, and it was like the Phoenix made a copy of her, kind of was her, but the major appeal here, let's just ignore all that confusing continuity, does have to do with the basic narrative. Somebody good turning bad. The idea of someone becoming so powerful that they give into that power and kind of become corrupted by it. It's kind of weirdly sexy. I guess because power is kind of sexy? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Number 3, Magneto. Magneto is obviously one of the hottest guys around in comics. The weirdest thing is, I'm not really sure what it is about him that makes him so attractive to so many of us. I mean, I guess Eric Lencher, like so many comic book characters, is very built, so physically there's that. If that's of course what you're into, like I think so many people are. For me, I think the charm of Magneto is just in his seriousness. I would just want to see him smile because he is typically such a strict, serious, and imposing figure. And then I suppose there is also a sense of fairness, and even a kindness to him that I expect many find appealing. Also, he's got great hair. Number 2, Revenant Storm. Revenant Storm was not in fact the real Storm, which is why she ranks only 2nd on this list. However, she is a version of Storm, albeit one that is evil and that exists on the astral plane. We first met Revenant Storm in 2013's Uncanny X-Force issue number 10. Here we also learn that these Revenants that we meet, who appear to be copies of mutant heroes, actually exist for every sapient being on planet Earth. Basically, it turns out that Revenants are like a form of which are beings who represent the anti-self that must be defeated prior to a person's birth, according to the Shi'ar and their mythos. Why is Revenant Storm so hot? Well, because she's an evil version of freaking Aurora Monroe. Also, that outfit though. Basically, anytime Storm is evil, or anytime Storm isn't evil, I think Storm is hot. That's how it goes. Next time we will have Vampire Storm, Bloodstorm. Number 1, Emma Frost. Emma is admittedly more of a hero now, but for a while before she turned to the side of good and joined the X-Men, she was known as an ally and member of the Hellfire Club, and an X-Men villain. Remember when she swapped bodies with Storm? Yeah, not cool, Emma. And the feud of those two has kind of carried on in the comics even today. Although in Krakoa both women are of course trying to move forward, and even have worked together as members and allies of the Marauders. Emma Frost is sexy, I think, because of how confident she is. At least that's what's really made me come around to falling in love with her. She is smart, confident, and really doesn't worry too much about what others think of her. Also, all those Hellfire Gala outfits, like damn! Emma was the best dressed at the Hellfire Gala. If you don't agree with me, we're gonna have to fight. Number 10, Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister is a Sinister clone who is implanted into the body of Claudine Renko via a genetic virus. This virus was Mr. Sinister's failsafe should anything happen to him, which of course it did. He ended up being killed during the events of Messiah Complex. Following his death, however, this failsafe was activated, transforming Claudine Renko into a perfect genetic copy of Mr. Sinister, but female. She also possessed Nathaniel's powers and his twisted personality. Claudine no longer existed, and in her place was Miss Sinister. Miss Sinister wouldn't last forever, and eventually Mr. Sinister would return to the comics, taking her place. Although I do think the idea of female clones of Sinister also existing is just a pretty cool idea, and I still kinda hope we could someday see a version of Miss Sinister brought back in the comics. I'm cool with there being a lot of clones of just Mr. Sinister, but what about some Miss Sinister clones too? That could be cool. All of the Sinisters. Sinister dinosaurs as well. Number 9, Donald Pierce. It's kind of weird really that I think Donald Pierce is attractive, but here we are. Now you know that I'm into the weird Victorian aesthetic of the Hellfire Club. Surprise, surprise. I feel like people that do know me would be not surprised by that at all. And of course I'm generally into that aesthetic, except for when it's being worn by Sebastian Shaw, of course. Sebastian is a brute, and I will never forgive him for what he did to Captain Kate and Lockheed. Ugh. Donald Pierce is extremely anti-mutant, but then again, he's also an X-Men villain, and around pretty much half of that group of the X-Men villains are pretty focused on, death to all mutants and that kind of stance. Donald Pierce himself was one of the original members we're introduced to of the Hellfire Club Inner Circle, holding the title initially of White Bishop. He's also part cyborg, which I'm also weirdly fine with. Even robots and, part robots deserve love. Love for cyborgs. This message from Amanda McKnight. Everyone love a robot today. Alright friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more hot villains lists, which as I said, I can do that. There's lots of hot X-Men villains, and I know y'all are going to be in the comments like, what about this person? So let's do a part 2 and let me know you want that by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister might seem like a weird one to include on this list, but have you seen him lately in the comics? He's a complete A-grade hottie. Something about Mr. Sinister with facial hair, just like rocking a beard, just really does it for me. Also, I love capes, and they're not super easy to pull off, so if you can pull off a cape, I think you deserve a spot on this list, which Mr. Sinister consistently does, so here he is. He's also just a really fun and creative villain, for better or sometimes for worse when it comes to plots. And if there is anything that screams hotness for me, it's creativity. I love creativity. Sure, he might be a mad-geneticist, but he's a fun mad-geneticist, you know what I mean? Number 7. Lady Mastermind. Mastermind himself is maybe one of the least attractive villains to me. Maybe it's the way that he operates, manipulating people's minds, or maybe it's just his really whiny nature in the original X-Men comics, or the fact that then he really couldn't take no for an answer, constantly attempting to win Scarlet Witch over to no avail. However, his daughter on the other hand, Reagan Wingard, aka Lady Mastermind, is a certified hottie. 1, she's just overall more physically attractive, to me anyways, but 2, she is also less whiny than her dad in general, which I also like. This might possibly be because she is more powerful than him and she doesn't really feel the need to prove how capable she is, so she doesn't get whiny. Of course, it could also be because Mastermind himself has paved the way for his daughter, meaning that her name and her abilities already mean something because of all of her dad has accomplished over time, improving her reputation as a capable villain. So doesn't need to be as whiny. Number 6. Callisto. With or without her tentacles, I'm just a big fan of Callisto. Callisto was at one point leader of the Morlocks and a villain to the X-Men. She kidnapped Angel and tried to make him marry her, not a great look. Fortunately, I think for both of them, that didn't work out, so yay. Honestly, that would be a weird pairing if it had happened and then still existed now. What would that be like in the future? Callisto for a long time has been a recurring enemy of Storm's. However, currently she's turned from being a villain to just being a straight up badass in the comics. She was depowered during M-Day, but still being a mutant took refuge on Krakoa. She now works alongside the Hellfire Trading Company, acting as Emma Frost's, the White Queen's, White Knight. She also recently got her powers restored after fighting and dying in the Crucible ceremony, asking Storm to fill in for Apocalypse as her own personal challenger. Storm and Callisto are pretty much cool now, so Storm actually did this for Callisto as a kindness, if that makes sense. If you're not reading the comics, it maybe doesn't make sense. Kill them not with kindness, but for kindness in this instance. That's what the Crucible's all about. If you want to know more about the Crucible, there's a whole X-Men issue on it from the last series of X-Men that started in 2019. Number 5. Solemn. Solemn is one of the new hotties on the X-Men villain block. That would be fun to imagine, just all these hot X-Men supervillains as neighbors. Sounds like a chaotic good time. Solemn is a mutant of Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was the one mutant we thought would face off against Wolverine, but in an unexpected turn, Solemn didn't even really fight at all. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was Saturnine's tournament and it was gloriously weird. Instead though, Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades to use in said tournament, making Wolverine tap in and fight on his behalf. Solemn is presented as being a smooth talker, master manipulator, and overall tricksy kind of person. Maybe that's why I like him so much? Number 4. Silver Samurai. Is there anything hotter than a well-trained swordsman and disciplined samurai? Silver Samurai has been a long-time enemy and sometimes frenemy of Logan, and is an iconic X-Men villain because of that. Whenever I think of Silver Samurai, or when I have seen him pop up on Krakoa lately, I always go back now in my mind to issue 3 of Wolverine's 1988 series. In that issue, we get to see him do some training in nothing but his undies and a mask. Oh, and he's wearing wrist bracers too. Gotta protect your wrists. The other thing I really find attractive about Silver Samurai is that despite being a villain, he still keeps to his own moral code, which is why he sometimes will even end up teaming up with his enemies or his rivals. If something is going on that he too does not agree with, he's willing to team up with even his enemies to put a stop to it. He's not too stubborn. And I like that. Number 3. Madeline Pryor. I mean, y'all know how I feel about Maddie. Madeline Pryor is probably one of my favorite X-Men villains around, especially because you can't help but feel for her if you know her backstory. Often referred to as the Goblin Queen, a lot of what makes Maddie so hot is just her dominant energy. She is a woman who gets what she wants no matter the cost, which has obviously driven her to do some pretty terrible things. The really tragic thing about Maddie though is that at the end of the day, she really just wants to be seen and loved and accepted, and it's like everything she does to try and get what she wants almost pushes her further away from happiness. She is the very epitome of the quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." She's deadly, dangerous, usually very unhinged, often filled with rage, but also very tragic. What is there not to love here? She's just so complex. I love characters that are complex. If you're a complex character in a comic, you're probably hot to me. Number 2. Selene. There is something so timeless about Selene, the way she is often drawn, and even her mannerisms and the way I imagine her voice to sound in the comics. This is probably because, well, she is actually ancient. Something I find very attractive about her is just that, her timelessness, her wisdom. But of course there is also the knowledge that she could drain the life force right out of you, just like that. Selene is an energy vampire who feeds on the life force of others. Her powers pretty much make her instantly a great and deadly villain. An immortal mutant, Selene is also a member of the group known as the Externals, not to be confused with the Eternals. That's a different group. The Externals are an immortal group of mutants who are generally all ancient and are often known for being unstoppable, or at least notoriously hard to kill. Number 1. Mystique. Is anyone surprised that Mystique took our top spot? I know I'm not. For me, it's not even Mystique's outward appearance, whatever she chooses it to be, her standard blue or another version. Mystique is attractive because of her drive. She goes for what she wants and she never gives up. She doesn't usually apologize, and although she's a villain, there are many times she has done things not with malicious intent, but because she thought it was the right thing to do in the end. I love Mystique for so many reasons, but I think the fact that she is a survivor is what I admire the most about her. She often does her own thing for her own reasons, and often to ensure her own survival. There is something so powerful and just so cool about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's also good to think of others and be compassionate. I'm not saying we should all be like Mystique all the time. That would be a lot, but I think there is something admirable in her ability to completely accept herself, unapologetically, and trust in her own ambitions and her own plans. For me, that's what attracts me to a lot of female villains. It's like this rebellion against all the constraints of what it means to be good. It's the anti of what I feel like is expected of me as a woman and just a human in general. And it's fun sometimes to be the opposite of that, you know? Be good, but then also be bad and be free. Number 10. Rogue and Iceman. One of the relationships that just didn't seem to work for many readers was the forced comic book relationship between Rogue and Iceman, which seemed to be inspired by the Fox X-Men films where the two were together. I'll admit that watching the movies I personally did not mind it, but of course in my heart of hearts Rogue and Gambit will always win out the day when it comes to both Rogue and Gambit's one true love and romance being each other. So it was very strange when the comics came to echo the films by trying to make Rogue and Iceman a thing. Because while in the movies Gambit might not be around to steal Rogue's heart, in the comics he still very much existed. Like, a lot. But instead it seemed that the Ultimate Universe had other plans that more followed in line with the Fox film franchise ships. After absorbing Gambit's powers and killing him, she ended up being able to touch people without hurting them, and so Rogue decided to touch Bobby. Because I guess that's what you do. Number 9. Richter and Wolfsbane. So admittedly these two weren't really so much a problem together, it was more when they had split up and then Richter was with his close friend and recent lover Shatterstar that things got kinda weird. Although they also had a kind of weirdness that was really well written and allowed us to tackle a bunch of different real world issues within the world of the X Factor series. So it was a good kind of weird, really. It was a good kind of weird. but it was still weird. Reign intended to rejoin X-Factor after leaving the X-Men and X-Force behind, only to find out that Richter is now with Shatterstar. And to be clear, I don't think Reign actually wanted to leave the X-Force, more she kinda got like kicked out of the X-Force. Sad. Reign returning was immensely offended by Richter having moved on, and by his gay relationship with Shatterstar. Reign actually claims that the child that she's pregnant with is Richter's, hoping to undo his gayness and win him back. The child was not Richter's of course, but was actually Harim Ari's, who had given up his life to save both Reign's and the life of their child. Eventually Richter finds out the truth about this, but in an amazing turn of events decides to still support Reign, despite the fact that she lied to him. And the two actually end up having a great heart-to-heart about just everything that's happened between them. Reign would even later team up with Shatterstar to defeat a demon following this ordeal. Like I said, it's weird, but it's good weird. Cause I also love that like part of the resolution is like, let's team up together and fight a demon. Yeah, that's bonding. Me and my ex's partner. I think it's so cute. Two exes coming together to be friends. Yes. Number 8. Everyone? Everyone in a relationship with everyone. Welcome to Krakoa. A more unconventional, I suppose, kind of weirdness is going on right now in Krakoa that has got a lot of people talking. People are talking about this all the time in comments online. They're like, what is going on? With this melting pot of all the X-Men and mutant history being mixed together, it seems like all relationships are kind of existing at once in a way on Krakoa right now. Relationships are not as clearly defined here. Many characters seem to be weaving in and out of multiple relationships almost seamlessly, as though we are kind of welcoming in an age of polyamory, which I guess makes sense considering one of the guiding laws or principles on Krakoa is to make more mutants. How do you do that? Well, when a mutant and another mutant fall in love. An example of this is what we are seeing in the summer house, where everyone has their own room, but you may have noticed that Wolverine is also bunkering down with the Summers. Jean's room in the house is actually situated between both Wolverine and Cyclops's, and both Logan and Scott also seem to be getting along better than ever, as though the love triangle has evolved to some kind of throuple, which I'm super into, I gotta be honest. But yeah, you should definitely check out, you gotta check out these blueprints, because you can see it. It's like Jean and then like Wolverine and Cyclops on either end of her rooms. And of course, this is only one of many different examples that are out there in the comics right now. I personally find it refreshing to see these types of less mainstream, but very much real world sorts of relationships getting some love in literature, and especially with very mainstream publishers like Marvel, because yeah, I feel like we don't see that as often. So is it weird really, or is it just great? I want to say it's just great. That's my opinion. But you can let me know your opinion in the comments, because that's also, I like other people's opinions, whether or not they match my own. Let's all share opinions and be friends. You know what I mean? Number 7. Pyro and Jean Grey. In issue 9 of Marauders, this ship happens between St. John Allardyce's Pyro and Jean Grey's Marvel Girl. Of course, no need to panic about how or why this happened, as in actuality, it's not real. I'm not sure if it was Pyro himself who came up with the idea of Jean and him being shipped in this telepathic illusion, or if it was Emma, but I feel like since Emma Frost's the one creating it for Yellow Jacket with the help of the Stepford Cuckoos, it's likely that she is the one who decided to ship the two together. I also see her being like, who do I want to ship Pyro with? Jean, because I hate Jean. No, I don't know. They love each other now. They hate each other. I don't know what's going on. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list as much as I am loving bringing it to you, please be sure to reciprocate the love by giving this video a thumbs up. And I'm sending love back out to you right now, so thank you for doing that. Number 6. Cypher and Bay. Technically both of these two are mutants, but their relationship developed kind of suddenly, which is what makes it so weird and also so great. Once again though, this is another kind of charming and endearing weird relationship. Really, I just love weird things, I think, so I think many of them are charming and endearing to me. Most of them are. These two met during the Otherworld tournament in the Ten of Swords event, and their challenge where they faced off against each other was to get married? If you like me love weird stuff by the way, and if you haven't checked out Ten of Swords yet, you need to do that. It is so amazingly weird. You gotta read it, it's so good. Both Cypher and Bay did end up following through with this challenge, both gaining points for their team. And since then, this arranged marriage between the Krakoan mutant and a Rocco mutant has stuck. Hey, if it works, it works. Number 5, Magic and the Death Commandos. So this is less of a full-blown relationship and more of a weird tactical move of Magic's in combat, but it caught me so off guard and made me laugh so hard when I read it that I thought I needed to share it with you, so here we go. Also, anything that allows me to celebrate the awesome Mutant series we have going on currently makes me really happy, so I'm happy to bring it to you. New Mutants being one of those series. Here, Magic and the team are facing off against Sybil and the Shi'ar Death Commandos, a group of hired muscle basically. At one point, Magic confronts the team of Death Commandos in issue number 5 of the newest New Mutants run, volume 4, that started in 2019. She asks them if any of them want to make out, and when they reveal that they either aren't interested or they're too busy working to accept her offer, she tells them they made the wrong choice. Apparently, if they had agreed, then Magic would have been cool defeating them with love, but in this case, they'll be dealing with Magic and her soul sword instead. Yeah, they definitely made a bad choice. And fortunately, none of them happen to be human, which means that Magic doesn't have to worry about not killing them as per Krakoa's rules. Some very bad news for the Death Commandos. Number 4, Angel and Psylocke. These two had some super intense weirdness show up in their relationship, and it all went down when Angel as Archangel became the new Apocalypse. Psylocke was his love at the time, and against her will he managed to brainwash her into becoming his bride, despite the fact that he was already with Pestilence, who was also his baby mama. He was like, I'm with you, Pestilence, but I feel like I need another bride, you know what I mean? All the brides gather round, says Angel. You might think, well, hey, that's pretty awful and weird, but guess what? It only gets weirder. Psylocke was freed of Archangel's / New Apocalypse's control and attempted to appeal to him, to make him remember the goodness inside of him and revert him back to the hero he was. However, when this failed, she was forced to kill him. Angel, however, didn't die permanently though, but instead was resurrected into a new version of himself, becoming Angel once more. This new version of Angel was a complete refresh of the character, with all of Warren's past memories being lost to him, including the memories about him and Psylocke being in a relationship. His appearance was also back to his original look, except for some reason he still had his techno-organic wings. Because I guess techno-organic wings are way cooler than organic wings, but you know what's not cool? His and Psylocke's relationship, I suppose. Because they cut that part. Number 3, Mystique and Gambit. More of a moment in the comics than a full-blown couple, but still these two together were a weird time. Especially considering that Gambit is often seen as the true love of Rogue, and Mystique is, of course, Rogue's mother. Adoptive mother, but all the same. Already we got a super weird scene where a mutant student of Gambit's, known as Fox, approached him in the showers attempting to seduce him. Gambit manages, though it seems just barely, to resist her charms, and this is already awkward enough as this is a student-teacher relationship, so but it's made even weirder when we later learn that Mystique had actually infiltrated the Xavier school under the guise of Fox, who was never really a true student as this was just a disguise devised by Mystique. Mystique later claims to have done this in an attempt to protect her daughter against Gambit, whom she didn't think was good enough for her daughter, but I gotta be honest, trying to seduce your daughter's partner seems like a really weird way at attempting to protect them. No wonder Rogue is always getting mad at her adoptive mama Mystique for meddling. She's like, this is weird, Mystique, don't meddle this way. This is not a normal mom thing, stop it. Number 2, Nightcrawler and Amanda Sefton. So this is a weird one, because before Amanda Sefton was known as Amanda Sefton, she was Jermaine Zardos, the daughter of Nightcrawler, admittedly his adopted sister, as Nightcrawler of course was not born into the Zardos family, but was merely taken in and raised by them. But still, it's pretty weird, they're still siblings. Even weirder, Jermaine had apparently always been in love with her brother, but when he was accused of murdering their other brother, Stefan, Jermaine refused to accept that Kurt had done so in cold blood, and sought him out to find out what was really going on. In truth, Kurt had actually killed Stefan, but only because Stefan had, at an earlier time, made Kurt promise to do so if he ever became too dangerous, which was what happened. Jermaine disguised herself as Amanda and did her best to make sure no one would recognize her, not even her brother Kurt, who grew up with her. This plan miraculously worked, and Amanda began to investigate and also date her brother. Oh my. What's going on? Number 1, Juggernaut and She-Hulk. Juggernaut isn't a mutant, and is usually more often thought of as an X-Men villain, but he has also teamed up with the X-Men from time to time, even sometimes seeing eye to eye with his stepbrother Charles Xavier, though usually that's not the case. She-Hulk, however, is not a member of the X-Men, nor has she ever been, and is not a mutant, but she is an acclaimed hero, which is one of the things that makes this relationship so weird. Well, that and the fact that it was a super random hookup. It all went down in Uncanny X-Men issue number 435 when She-Hulk was representing Juggernaut in the court of law. The ship was considered so abhorrent that years later, She-Hulk actually denied that it ever happened. In the 2005 She-Hulk series in issue 21, it was claimed that an alternate version of She-Hulk from Earth 721, who had been on vacation and impersonating her 616 counterpart, was actually the one who did the deed. And She-Hulk stands by that to this day. She's like, it wasn't me, it was an alternate version of me, I would never do that. But people are like, what's the real story, She-Hulk? What really happened? I believe her. I believe She-Hulk. She would admit to it if she did it, that's what I think. Number 10. Kitty Pryde and Star-Lord. This is one of those relationships where there was really no reason for these two to be together. Really. It's just so random. Star-Lord is cosmic, Kitty is an X-Men. I'm not saying the X-Men never go to space, because they definitely do go to space a lot, but it seems like these two only got together because they happened to meet one another in space once, then they began a long distance relationship, from there things got more serious and eventually ended up with Kitty joining the Guardians, accepting Star-Lord's marriage proposal, but later deciding her and Peter just weren't meant to be because, well, he couldn't prioritize their relationship while also ruling Spartax. Which I get it, when you're ruling a world, it's probably hard to have a relationship, but I don't know, maybe let your partner help you with it? I don't know. Me trying to give relationship advice to superheroes. Number 9. Bishop and Deathbird. I mean, this was mostly just a weird relationship. What do these two characters have in common? Not much. Their relationship was pretty much constantly strained because they rarely ever agreed with anything, and also because Bishop is a hero and Deathbird is a villain, they would even fight against one another during the course of their relationship. Overall, it just seems odd that they tried so hard to make this work when it was obviously never going to. The one thing I will say that was cool that came out of these two being together is that there's an alternate reality where they actually stay together and they have a daughter, Aaliyah Bishop, who is pretty cool, unique, cosmic based, and overall is a badass character. So yeah, I like her. So there's a bit of a silver lining here, as with most weird, but not all weird couples. At least we got a silver lining, so that's nice. And friends, before we move on to our next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to show it by clicking like, subscribing, commenting, doing all the things. Also, if you love X-Men as much as I love X-Men, we got a playlist for that, so check it out. Number 8. Cyclops and Emma Frost. So actually, over the course of working on this channel, I have come to love and respect the relationship between Cyclops and Emma. I think I actually, over time, have just come to love and respect Emma more as a character. It's like the more I read about her and get to know her, the more I love her. Remember way back when I started on this channel and I said I could only imagine Cyclops with Jean? Nah, those days are gone. I have changed since then. But what is weird about these two together is when Emma kind of cosplayed as Jean and then had an affair with Cyclops in his mind? That was a pretty strange moment in their relationship, made only more weird by Jean psychically walking in on them. Like, imagine walking in on your partner to find them cheating on you with someone who is dressed up just like you. That would be an experience, right? Especially if you walked in on them in their mind. It's a lot. Although I'd also be like, why are you in my mind? This is an invasion of my mind privacy. Number 7. Bloke and his unnamed boyfriend. Well, there are lots of people that come to mind when we first talk about Marvel's first gay relationships and intimate moments in the comics. The very first gay kiss, I believe, came actually in 2001, but it's a little disappointing. Bloke is a new member of the X-Force who just happens to be gay. We meet him first in issue 117 of X-Force, and in issue 118 we get to see him with his boyfriend. But in the same issue, he also ends up dead. So, making it pretty weird that this is where Marvel chose to introduce a gay couple. I guess for some this might be seen as kind of cool because there wasn't really any showboating with Bloke's sexual identity. He was gay, but then he didn't make a big deal out of it, and it wasn't made a big deal out of in the comic. But on the other hand, introducing a gay character only to kill him shortly after revealing that he's gay, that's kind of a weird choice. However, you do have to give credit to Peter Milligan for even putting this in the comic and then for continuously showcasing gay characters in his work. So this wouldn't be the last gay couple that we'd see in X-Force, and likely actually pave the way for making those more long-lasting characters and relationships in comics possible. So it's weird, but it's also not weird. You know what I mean? Number 6. Storm and Quicksilver. Say what? When did this happen? Or more importantly, where did this happen? This is a relationship that comes to us from the universe of Earth 295, also referred to as the Age of Apocalypse. Storm and Quicksilver might sound like the weirdest couple ever on paper, but you have to remember that both characters were different in this universe. Quicksilver was much less of a brat here, as in Age of Apocalypse he lost his sister quite early on, and this was also a much more apocalyptic type reality, which meant more was demanded of him. Storm was still her badass self though. I don't think there's a reality that exists where Storm is not a badass. Number 5. Rogue and Sentry. This one is only half of an X couple, but it's so bizarre I had to bring it up, so you're welcome. Back when Sentry was retconned into existence, it was also heavily implied that he was Rogue's first. And all because he was the only one who could touch her. I have so many questions. And I also feel like we need to stop putting Rogue in relationships with people simply because they can touch her. Physical intimacy does not a relationship make. I know that it's probably been hard for Rogue not being able to touch those that she loves, but that shouldn't mean that she falls in love with someone just because she can touch them and they can touch her, right? Which is definitely what is implied happened here when the subject is brought up during Sentry's funeral and she runs off in tears. Poor Rogue. For so many reasons, poor Rogue. Number 4. Husk and Angel. Husk and Angel are a couple that I have a lot of feelings about. The weirdest part of this relationship that most people point to is the age difference and the difference in experience between the two. Warren is a full-on adult and one of the original X-Men members. In other words, he's older. Whereas Husk is a teenager. I think she was like just 19 or 18, so technically an adult but still pretty young. Still a teenager, so like an adult but a teenager. Young adult. There's also the fact that Husk was this weird rebound for Angel where he claimed he was going to love her forever, but it didn't really last past Chuck Austin's run, and it's never really come up since, I don't think. He had just gotten out of a lengthy relationship with Betsy Braddock, who was going by Psylocke at the time. It was just an awkward relationship, and if you don't believe me, take a look at the time Husk and Angel made up after an argument by getting intimate in the sky above Paige's mom and the X-Men. Yikes. That was a thing that happened. Number 3. Stacy X and Angel. And if you thought Paige and Warren were weird, I have one that's even a little bit weirder perhaps. Stacy X is a mutant who can affect the way you feel, making you nauseous, dizzy, or even really good, using pheromones. She worked for a time at a brothel using her mutant powers. That brothel got attacked by an anti-mutant group and burnt to the ground, so Stacy X reluctantly at first decided to join up with the X-Men, who would help to confront the group that targeted her workplace. She ended up developing a pretty epic crush on Angel, to the point that although she knew he was already taken, she sent him a video of her jumping rope naked. This never really led to a full-on relationship, but it's so wild I had to include it. Also, apparently this is a thing that people do. People on Twitter told me this is a thing that people do. I'm not sure if I fully believe it, but apparently it happens. Also, I love Stacy X, but she is so weird. Like, who sends someone a video of them jumping rope naked? This is a real thing? This is a real thing? What's happening with the world? What are we doing with our lives? Stacy X must have some amazing inner confidence and self-esteem, and anyone that's done that to send those videos. I love that. I love that confidence, I will say. Love yourself, love your body, jump rope naked. I don't know. What are the takeaways from this list? Number 2, Madeline Pryor and Cyclops. I mean, I have to talk about this one. I have to talk about it. I don't have a choice. Madeline Pryor is the clone of Jean Grey created by Mr. Sinister so that he could engineer the perfect mutant offspring, or just the perfect mutant if you will, after Jean's apparent death. Cyclops would meet Maddie and fall in love with her because, well, she reminded him of Jean, probably, although for some reason no one ever thought this was super suspicious or weird that she was a one-for-one copy of Jean. Just a coincidence, they thought. Nothing to worry about, they thought. Well, turns out it was something to worry about when Jean Grey reappeared after Scott and Maddie had their first child together and were married, and Cyclops decided to leave his family to go adventuring with his fellow mutants once more. This ended up driving Maddie crazy, unlocking her true psionic potential and causing her to make a deal with demons. Because that's what happens when someone leaves you. She would go on to have an affair with Scott's brother Havoc and become a frightening mutant-based supervillain. So, not your typical fairy tale ending for these two. Number 1, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And if you want to get into more awful stuff from the universe from whence this relationship came, be sure to check out Worst Things from the Marvel Ultimate Universe. That's a series of videos we did, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happened. I got a lot more things to share with you. Yes, on the Earth of 1610, also known as the Ultimate Reality, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were a couple. And yes, they were still brother and sister. And it could be possible in this reality that Wolverine, who saw them getting intimate together, was even their father. It was probably still Magneto though, but it definitely doesn't make any of this better. It doesn't make it better. I mean, I don't know what you could do to make this relationship better. Either just don't have it happen at all, or have these two not be brother and sister. Or at least make it so they didn't know that they were brother and sister and this was some kind of awful, twisted mistake. That might help, but no, they knew. They were into it. People joked about it, and then it was confirmed as being a thing in the Ultimate Comics. On behalf of 1610, I'm very sorry about that.